Ahlan wa sahlan, Mara Thania. Alright, this is part 2 of our study of reading strategies. Last time we talked about the idafa and what you need to know about those. Now we're going to keep everything from there. It's still going to apply to this, but we're going to talk about another part of reading strategies, and this is again using something very familiar to us, the Nisba Adjective. You studied this before, but we're going to talk specifically now how to use this in reading authentic materials. Okay, so our first question, what was the Nisba Adjective? Well, you might not remember it by name, but you certainly remember how to do this. These are adjectives made from nouns, and the first place you encountered these was dealing with nationalities. So we said like Iraqi, Masri, Amriki, Tunisi, and so forth. Now just a little review. These are all made starting with a noun like Al-Iraq, Masr, Amrika, right? If you remember, we cut off the al, we cut off tamabuta, anything we need to, but we add the ending e for masculine and iya for feminine. Iraqi, Iraqiya, Masri, Masriya, Amriki, Amrikiya. Alright, that's probably very familiar. That's an old 101 thing that you remember. Now, as you also probably remember, it's not only nationalities we can do this with. Basically, any noun can be turned into a nisba. So, like for example, ilmi, from ilm. Ilm, we know, is a science. Alum, sciences. Ilmi, scientific. Now look here, ta'aleem. Now you all know ta'aleem. We've learned that word, a measure to masdar. Ta'aleem means education. Ta'aleemi, educational. Right? Say you're going on an educational trip. Rehla ta'limiyya. And a very similar word, dirasi, dirasiya, from darasa. Darasa is study. So we talk about asana ad-dirasiya, essentially the academic year, the studying year, because you guys study a lot. All right. And we can do this with any other noun. For example, a lot of colors are made from Nisba adjectives. The word for pink is wardi. Well, ward is a rose. Warda is a rose. Ward is the collective noun for roses. Okay, so wardi, rose. Benefsij is also a flower. Okay, benefsiji is purple, and of course, Portugal is an orange, named after the country. Portucali, orange color, orangish. Okay, so you're by now you're quite familiar with this. Now something else, we haven't really emphasized it, but it's just like English, is these adjectives can function as nouns. Now you say, okay, we take a noun, turn it into an adjective, then turn it back to a noun. Yeah, why not? For example, and here's, probably the most familiar examples from English, right? Like we say, 2 Egyptians, Americans, right? Or, your old favorite, 3 guys walk into a bar, right? An Italian, a Russian, and whatever, Norwegian, okay? Now, though, when we think about it, 2 Egyptians, Egyptian is an adjective. It's a Nisba adjective. This is an adjective. American is an adjective, right? Like, American flag, American cars. But we're using them here as nouns. I mean, what this really means is 2 Egyptian people, American people, and so forth. So this is done a lot. We do it in English. It's done probably a lot more in Arabic. Like, they'll call someone El Qasir, which literally means the short guy, but they don't have the guy, just the short one, the short person, right? So, this is another big part of reading authentic material. So let's look at an example. This may look familiar to you. We had this example as one of our exercises a way back, and it caused some problems. So let's zoom in on the headline. Okay, and we specifically want to zoom in on this word, intihari. Okay. Well, if you look up intihar in the dictionary, intihar means suicide. You may have known that already. Okay, intihar means suicide. And I think most everybody got that. You had the word suicide in your translation, but how to use it was a little bit difficult. So, if intihar is suicide, then intihari is suicidal. It's an adjective from suicide. And I think none of us would have any problem with that. Intihari means suicidal. The problem then is, how is it being used here? Because this is not an adjective, this is a plural noun. So this is literally saying suicidals. And as you can see, our spell checker has underlined that because that's not a word in English. Just because we don't use it in English, but it actually makes perfect sense. It's as sensible as saying Egyptians, Americans, right? Americans, Italians, suicidals, right? We don't use this word. But this is what it's saying. So literally we've taken intihar, suicide, intihari, suicidal, and pluralized it. So we came back here. Hopefully you recognize this was an idafa. Maqtal intiharin. Maqtal is killing. Killing of two suicidals. Now again, this is terrible English, but it makes sense. You know what is being said here. Okay. And this literally, the killing of two suicidals. Now you may ask me, how do I know it's two? Good question. Because intihariin is plural, intihariain would be two. They're written the same way without the vowels. How do I know it's two and not more than two? Well, you don't know until you get here. Notice the suffix, humma. Humma means two. Okay, if we didn't have humma, then it would be just an undetermined number of suicidals. Killing of suicidals, khilal, during. And then, as you notice, we get two measure three masdars, muhawwala, muhajjama. I believe both of them we had on our dictionary exercise, so you probably know what they are already. Okay, but muhawwala is an attempt. In this case, muhawwalatihimma, the attempt of those two. This is again how we know it's two of them. If there were more than two, it would be muhawwalatihim. Killing of two suicidals during their attempt, muhajjama, to attack. Muhajjama is attack, and then masjid fi Nigeria. I think we know what the rest of that means. And so this is the way we would translate it. Notice we stick pretty closely to the word order, except when we have to be aware of idafas and so forth. Okay? So that's how we would do that one. Again, now if you didn't recognize this, basically suicidals, right? Which we, to pretty it up in English, we'll call them this, but I mean that's literally what it's saying. If you didn't recognize this, then you started to have a lot of problems with it. Okay, you're saying this is fabulous, but I need another example. All right, here's another example. This is a great one. Okay, fabulous. Okay, so obviously we want the title, and we want to focus in on that first word. Now, right off the bat, you recognize Misr in there. Okay, this begins with Misr, but then it goes off track pretty quickly. Masri'u. Well, again, if you don't know your idafa rules and your nisbas, you are probably really lost here, and goodness knows what you translated this is. But you do know those. So Misr, Masri. Masri is Egyptian. We're good so far with Egyptian. Okay. Masri'u. Now there's a problem, except you remember we just did last lesson these u's sitting by themselves, particularly if they're next followed by a definite noun. And this one you have an even bigger clue because you have quotes on either side of this, so this tells you this whole thing is definitely a phrase. So we know this is Misri'un, and the noon has dropped because it's in an idafa. So this says Egyptians. Egyptians of something. Well, now the rest of it will be pretty easy. Al-Kharij. I think everyone recognizes the root. Kharaja means to leave, go outside, exit. Kharij, which, because it has al, it's a noun. Kharij, if you look it up, it means the outside. Egyptians of the outside. Now notice it's parentheses, not parentheses, it's in quotes, so it means it's a phrase. Egyptians of the outside. What do you mean? Egyptians who live outside Egypt, Egyptian expatriates, the Egyptian diaspora, whatever word you want to use. It's Egyptians who are outside Egypt. And how can you can definitely tell by reading the rest of it, right? Yusawatun means they vote. They vote upon Allah. They vote on what? El Dastur. Some of you may have had to look up Dastur if you haven't studied it yet, but the word means constitution. So the Egyptians of outside vote on a new constitution. Okay, that's exactly what it says. Why? Because we know this Nisba adjective. We know it's being used as a plural noun. We can see that it's in an idafa relationship because of the noon that is dropped off, and then the rest of it goes pretty smoothly. So we're left with a literal translation, which makes absolute sense. It just sounds horrible, so you pretty it up into English. Egyptian citizens living outside Egypt, or the Egyptian diaspora, or Egyptian expatriates. Right, it's fabulous. Okay, we have just one more example for you, and this one, if you get this one, you will feel great. We're going to show you this. Take a look at it. Now see if you can figure it out. Before you do, there's probably two words in here that you would have to look out. First one, yudin. Yudin means to condemn, to criticize. Hadara means to prohibit, to embargo. That's basically what that means, right? The rest of this you either know or you will be able to figure it out. So take a minute, pause, and see if you can figure out this entire headline. You should be able to do it if you just apply the rules that we said. Okay, you're back. My, that was quick. Okay, so you got it? Let's take a look and see if you got it. All right, so obviously we want to focus on the first two words up here. Now, you have a little clue that it's blank el Kuwait. Something of Kuwait. This has to be an idafa because what else? This is not a verb, right? So this tells you this is some kind of idafa, most likely. Okay, so it's the blank of Kuwait, the emir of Kuwait, whatever. Let's see. Now look at this word. First thing you should notice, if I ask you what kind of word this is, probably everyone will say, ooh, that's not an Arabic word. It's a foreign word because it's got too many long vowels. And you would be absolutely correct. Now, what should you do whenever you see a foreign word? You should sound it out very loudly so everyone around you can hear. If you sound out this word, then you probably have figured it all out. But sound it out, and it's right. Libraliu, 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 liberal, right? But what has happened? Libraliu, why u? Well, by now, we're used to when we see an indefinite word with an u at the end, we know it's libraliun, the liberals. Because why? Librali is the adjective. Librali, meaning liberal. Libraliun, liberals. Again, an adjective being used in this case as a noun. The noon drops out because it's in an idafa. That makes perfect sense because it's the first two words in this sentence. The liberals of Kuwait, and now you can do the whole rest of the sentence. The liberals of Kuwait condemn da'wah. We've had da'wah yadu, right? To invite. The call to prohibit what? Now this one you know. Ihtifal bi-Eid al-Milad. The liberals of Kuwait are condemning the call to prohibit Christmas celebration. Notice it's not been prohibited yet. There's a call, there's a move to prohibit it. They are condemning that. Now notice, okay, if you followed the idafa rules here, you understood what this word meant, then the rest of this followed very, very easily. If you didn't, if you just got a bunch of words, then your translation of this would probably come out really, really wacky because these words could be jumbled into all kinds of order. Alright, so I think that's it with that. You are now prepared to read a lot of authentic headlines. So on behalf of my good friend Cooper, who is so excited, I want to wish you all the best. Shukran jazilan.